House, we were joined by the woman who should get all of the Pulitzers that were won by the New York Times and the Washington Post for their Russia lies. And instead, they should be rebranded Miranda Devine Awards, if she wanted them, for everything that she has done in the New York Post, covering all of the lies of Joe Biden and his family. Joined now by Miranda Devine herself. Miranda, as all of this stuff is now getting thrown out there and you see every other media outlet beginning to cover I read, my eyes almost popped out of my head, an editorial in the New York Times over the weekend saying, oh, Hunter Biden needs to be charged with a lot of crimes for violating the Foreign Registry Lobbying Law, FARA. And would any of these stories ever have come out at this point if Joe Biden were still running? Or is this just a sign that they're done protecting him? How do you assess based on your reporting?
Yeah, I think the latter, that they are done with protecting him. They've protected him since the beginning of his candidacy. They lied. They traduced the New York Post. They traduced Rudy Giuliani and the whistleblowers and everybody else who was telling the truth about Joe Biden's corruption. James Comer, the Oversight Committee chairman, has been completely pilloried in his hometown. They sent, media operatives from Associated Press and elsewhere just pretty much camped out there trying to find dirt on him to no avail. This has been a complete media protection campaign, let alone the CIA, the DOJ, the IRS, who've all protected the Bidens. But now that Joe Biden is no longer a candidate, they're going to just seamlessly, as you saw with the New York Times, just move on to normal reporting, as if this is a normal story that's just suddenly emerged.
Miranda, I saw a tweet, and I wanted to have you break this down for us a little bit. You're looking at the issue of this election and some of the, let's just say, possible pitfalls or fraud that could happen here. This was in your tweet. Alabama found over 3,000 illegal aliens on their voter rolls. What is happening in PA, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Arizona? We'll never know because they're run by Democrats. Trump lost by 45,000 votes in a handful of states last time. Biden and Harris have let in 12 to 18 million illegals in their administration. They are giving them social security numbers. Okay, well, there's a lot here. I mean, let's start with Alabama finding over 3,000 illegals on their voter rolls. Why is a single illegal on the voter rolls?
Well, I mean, that's a very good question. And it's also something that we were told wasn't happening. We're still being told by Democrats and their allied media that there's no way, this is just a MAGA conspiracy theory that illegal aliens are voting because it's illegal. So, of course, they're not going to do it. I mean, these are people whose very first act on coming into the United States was to commit a crime, was to cross the border illegally. So I don't think the fact that there's a law saying it's illegal, that it is never prosecuted or very rarely prosecuted, is going to dissuade them from doing what Democratic operatives are encouraging them to do. So I started looking at this because actually Maria Bartiromo just texted me on the weekend, and she said that a friend of hers had sent her this really disturbing text about, trying to, this was in Texas, trying to get her 16-year-old son to get a driving test at the local DMV in Fort Worth. And they were booked out for months ahead. So she went to various other DMVs, and finally she just was fed up, and she just got in the car and went to one of these DMVs and found that there was a huge queue of illegal aliens who were getting driver's licenses. They can get social security numbers and driver's licenses. And then there were NGOs outside the DMVs with little tables set up to help them register, encouraging them all to register to vote. So if you are not allowed to vote, why would they want to register them to vote? There's a kind of disconnect there. And then the other piece of the puzzle that you need to understand is that there are only 3 states that require citizenship, proof of citizenship to vote. So really, there are just no guardrails.
Also worth noting, as my 16-year-old told me last night, we were watching the DNC, they have extensive security apparatus that requires you to present a ID in order to get into the DNC, right? You have to have a photo ID extensively documenting your past in order to be able to access the DNC itself, which is, of course, very interesting. Miranda, I also saw this, and it was on the front page of the New York Times. They have accelerated the rate at which they are swearing in new citizens to I believe it was a 15-year high. They are trying to get as many people sworn in as fast as they can. The minute that they're being sworn in, left-wing media, left-wing voter advocacy groups are there to make sure that everybody gets registered. Again, it's on the front page of the New York Times. They don't talk about it for the immediate political ramifications, but isn't that a sign of them pulling out all the stops to get as many people as possible that they think is going to be on their side in? I mean, to do a 15-year high of citizenship swearings in this fall is pretty crazy.
Yes, it really is rather a coincidence, isn't it? And it's just so typical that, a federal government, which is so incredibly incompetent at everything else, suddenly manages to be really good when it suits the powers that be, whether it's collecting taxes or signing up people to vote and or to become citizens, new citizens, so that they'll vote for the Democrats. And, behind a lot of really nefarious happenings in this country at the moment is one man, Alexandra Mayorkas. And he's, of course, the DHS secretary. And when you look at censorship, you look at the illegal alien invasion that he has ushered in and then sort of secreted all these illegal migrants across the country by flying them from the border and, in fact, from across the border to a community near you so that people don't notice how many millions of illegals there are here. And then Mayorkas also is in charge of the Secret Service. So really, whenever you look at something that's going really badly awry in this country, there's one man behind it very often.
Miranda, you put out, again, the estimate here for Biden's border of 12 to 18 million. I'm just wondering if you could walk us through. I think they admit by their own numbers to 10, right? But give me your sense, because first of all, whether it's 12 or 18 is jaw-dropping. It's the most we've ever seen that are permanent illegals, meaning they're not trying. People talk about the 90s, and I've spoken to Border Patrol about this. Some of the numbers were guys who would actually go back and forth to Mexico many times, and there were single adult males who were coming to work and going back, coming to work and going back. These are people that are planning to stay forever. But that 12 to 18 million estimate, how do you what would mean we're at the high end? What would mean we're at the low end?
Well, look, I mean, even if there were only 8 million, it's still an absolute crisis. But the numbers are much larger than what they're saying because they don't account for the gotaways. And the gotaways are just, often they're cartel gang members, people with criminal records, pedophiles, psychopaths, gangsters, murderers, terrorists. We know that there have been dozens of terrorists, including ISIS terrorists, that have actually been apprehended. But if you're a terrorist, you don't want to be apprehended. So they know Border Patrol has some idea about gotaways, and Bill Malusian from Fox News is very good on this, just by footprints and infrared cameras and so on. But no one really knows how many there are. And now that the border is actually controlled by the cartels, and it's so vast, I mean, the poor Border Patrol people are held up babysitting and doing sort of bureaucracy rather than actually stopping these people coming across the border. And, everybody knows that Joe Biden unwound all of Donald Trump's border protection measures on day one with these executive orders. He could easily at any time in the last 3.5 years have written new executive orders unwinding his unwinding, and he hasn't done that. And instead they're pretending they need Congress to act. And that, I think, is how Kamala Harris is trying to frame her culpability as the borders are as some sort of virtue now. She's pretending that she's tougher on the border than Donald Trump. The numbers speak for themselves.
Miranda, you have covered politics for a while. Again, I encourage you guys to go follow Miranda. I love all the work she does at the New York Post. I also think New York Post is the best newspaper in America in terms of being fun and right on most issues. Now, I like the Wall Street Journal the most, Miranda, but you guys are number 2 on my favorites list. But how unbelievable is Kamala Harris' ascension, and the fact that even with this crazy ascension to the nomination, she has not talked to anyone in media? Contextualize this based on your experience, how extraordinary the times that we are in right now as it pertains to what the Democrats are trying to do.
Well, I mean, it's a whole new playbook. I guess really Joe Biden began it, and the pandemic allowed him that latitude to run a basement campaign and hide from the media. And it worked so well. They won the election. So, of course, they're going to do it again. And instead of having a senile candidate, as Joe Biden obviously was back in 2019, to anyone who observed him in action in Iowa and New Hampshire, they now have a candidate who really is not good on her feet. She's not good at stringing together arguments, and she gets very nervous and high-pitched, and she's just terrible. And so they've decided that they're going to hide her away because they got away with it with Joe Biden. And I think they'll get away with it now because the media is not really complaining, and the public doesn't really know that this is out of the ordinary. And so what you're seeing is images of Kamala Harris, who is attractive, she looks dignified, she's well-dressed, she's always smiling and looking joyful. And the few words that she says, like last night at the convention, when she just came on for a minute and a half and just spoke about love and how, you know, we should unite and there's more that joins us together than divides us. People want to hear that. People want to feel good. They don't want to feel angry and aggrieved. And you know, I do think that there is a danger that Kamala Harris, as awful a candidate as she is, as repellent as her policies are, I think that Republicans are banking too much on the debate being the sort of eye-opener for the American voter. I think that potentially she will get the questions because her best friend is a senior executive at ABC, and the Democrats did this before with Donna Brazile. And so she's quite good at the teleprompter. She'll memorize some answers. And if she doesn't completely fail because the expectations are now held so low for her, then it'll be chalked up as a huge victory, and she'll coast that with no other scrutiny to the election.
I agree with everything Miranda's saying about that, which is a little depressing, but I think she's right. Miranda Devine, New York Post columnist, Laptop from Hell author. Miranda, always appreciate you making the time for us. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Clay and Buck.
Recall for a moment, if you can, the video clips you've seen of President Reagan speaking back in the day. Do you remember that soaring feeling that you had when our nation was in good hands? Well, a new movie comes to theaters next Friday, just in time for Labor Day, that will help those memories flood back to your mind. It's called Reagan, and it stars Dennis Quaid as the president. He's done a brilliant job of recreating that folksy style of President Reagan, including the jokes, the twinkle in the eye, the optimism, and most of all, enduring love for his country. If you're going to get a full history lesson on American politics, fighting communism, culture here in America, and most importantly, witness one man's pursuit of what's right for this country, you got to check out Reagan. And while you're watching this movie, you cannot help but notice the parallels to what candidate Reagan dealt with in 1979 when he was running for office to what life is like today, 45 years later. Penelope Ann Miller's the actress playing Nancy Reagan. She does a great performance. You get a true sense of their love story and the First Lady's encouragement toward President Reagan. See him and help him persevere in the fight for the light over darkness. Get your tickets now at ReaganMovie.com. Go check it out. It is fantastic. ReaganMovie.com.